How's it going, laser bruises? I'm Bobby Sixkilla and welcome back to Sekimeiya. Now, if you were here for the last episode, and I don't see why you would start at episode 20, whatever the hell this is, so I assume you were, but you'll know that shit got real in the last episode. Everybody started dying, and I'm not even sure if I'm on the path to a bad end or not, which could be a thing, because we had our first choice as well. I don't know what's going to happen, so let's just carry on and see if we end up with a bad end, game over type thing, and we need to jump back to our choice, or whether, like, this is just how it's gonna go now, because the pacing is escalating. We arrived at the entrance to the attic, and the key was still in the keyhole, so we began to go up the narrow staircase. A reason behind the Shiroi I just saw, who still has to be somewhere. Is it a coincidence that the hardest mysteries to solve have involved double selves? Now that I think about it, almost everyone but me has produced this mystery individually. Naomi's body appeared dead twice, so I existed both in the attic and on the crystal floor. And simple time travel couldn't explain it. What about the Arcado who had different memories? Isla and Edina had died despite the fact that they're supposed to be alive in the future. Now a Shiroya was very hard to explain, with pure time travel had suddenly shown itself. Maybe it's not time travel, maybe it's teleporting us between alternate universes. Maybe we've got the multiverse, and that's why Arcado's memories were so different. He got moved to a universe that was very different from his one, where the whole thing is played out very differently. That wouldn't be too far-fetched for a game like this, right? Where was I? Isla and Edina had died despite the fact that they are supposed to be alive in the future. Now, a Shiroya that's very hard to explain with pure time travel has suddenly shown herself. The core mystery is always the origin of the extra person and their reason for existing. Something else might have been happening right under our noses, and we just haven't noticed yet. Could it be related to a second Katai hasn't appeared? Could the reason behind that be linked to what Arcado said? He didn't know who Katai was, but he knew me. So he doesn't exist, or he's not in this event in the alternate reality that Arcado comes from. Katai is not there, but he is in our universe. And the reason we haven't seen a second one is because the other universe, maybe we're just going between two universes. The second one of each we've seen has been the other universe coming into our universe and then going back, or vice versa, or whatever, right? But because there's only one Katai between the two universes in this event, we can only see the one. It doesn't seem like anyone's been here recently. Going off the floor, we entered, leaving behind the first footprints in a while. If anyone had entered or exited the attic, they must have used the elevator. However, since the key had still been placed in the keyhole, it was unlikely the elevator had been used to enter it. I believe it's the right bedroom. The wardrobe had a few articles of clothing. That one, right? I saw them too. I nodded and walked to it. Inside, a few old-looking clothes hung in the empty space. I thought so, you were wearing these. I took out a moderately sized white shirt and dark pants, neither of which looked to have been designed for a young girl. These? I'm not sure I like them. Well, there isn't much to choose from. I suppose, yeah. I'd imagine I'd pick these if I wanted to use the wardrobe to dress up. And you were wearing them, even though they're here. I'm very lost about this, but does this mean that I'll go back to the past with them? I don't know. Could something else have been the answer? I thought about that first. I just put together that it was very unlikely anyone had entered the attic recently. That meant the Shiroya I'd seen couldn't have dashed up to the attic to leave those clothes back in the wardrobe. I did imagine that had happened, but it wasn't out of the question. I didn't imagine. If that Shiroya had possessed another key to the attic, she should have come faster than us while we'd gone to the security room. I wasn't sure if she could have used a single key we knew existed. The elevator had probably been on the crystal floor, so if she had the key, she would have had to go up with it, leaving the clothes behind, taking the elevator down to the 6th floor, sending it to the crystal floor, and placing the key back in the attic's keyhole. Even though they look the same, I'm willing to assume these clothes aren't the exact same ones I saw you wearing, meaning that two identical sets exist at the moment. If your other self is still here somewhere. It feels pointless trying to think about how it happened when I'm completely clueless as to why it did. However, if you travel to the past and see me in the event room, something similar to our last travel has to happen. You mean that if we are going... sorry, I have to stop again. If we are going to separate universes, his whole idea about not being able to change anything and shit is completely fucking bullshit. Just as I said the whole time. If it's an alternate universe, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to change it, because you're not changing the past. You're changing the present in another place, I guess, for lack of a better word. You mean that I'd need to wear the clothes for a while and then travel with the Sekimeiya. Then I'd have to appear far enough back that the replicated location would have to be from the time I was wearing the clothes. I was getting incredibly overwhelmed, as she said that was a way to accomplish it. Other arrangements existed, such as travelling far to the past, borrowing the clothes, seeing me in the event room, and eventually going to the past again to return them to the wardrobe. Nonetheless, it didn't make any sense. Why would she do that? It was so bizarre and unlike anything else that had happened that I couldn't even think of a semi-logical explanation. Let me see. It's possible we'll come across that version of you again, even though she didn't look too surprised to see me. Just in case we do, I opened the drawers and took a marker out. I hope this hasn't dried yet. If these cameras are still actually working, I might get in trouble for this, but it could tell us something of value. You're gonna leave a mark? Yes. Washing it won't get rid of it, so I'll make it tiny. On the collar of the shirt, I drew a tiny black cross. The more I think about it, the more unlikely it seems that whatever happened was accomplished by travelling from the future. It'd be a loop without origin, which is not how a consistent timeline would work. Just like I'd thought when we'd been locked up, there was a way to place the origin of the loop inside Shidoya's mind. If, in the event room, she'd created a plan in which a future self of hers would lure us to accomplish something, and she'd later travel to fulfill reality, I'd begin to accept it as possible. Since it had happened to Shidoya though, I wasn't able to reason it out like that. If we ever see that version of you again, and you're wearing these clothes, I'll check the spot. If the mark is there, it'll mean you travelled from the future with it, somehow. If it's not, it'll tell us the truth is different, and it won't be. I'm totally right, I know I'm right, this has gotta be it, right? It's alternate universes, and that's what decides where you show up. They were saying, oh, we were standing here, so where we were in the past at that time is where we show up. But maybe we're not travelling in the past at all. Maybe it's the present in the other place and things are just happening at a different speed or a different... I mean, if Katai's not there, that could hugely influence the way that shit's playing out. Right? You just put that there, keep that in the back of your head. I'm gonna be right, I swear to God. If we couldn't see the mark, there would be many ways to make it happen, involving having travelled from the future, and they'd all have to rely on leaving the clothes back in the wardrobe before we'd seen them. Once again, I couldn't help but experience an impending and threatening pressure, and I tried to think about what reason could have existed behind it all. I left the marker inside the drawer and sat on the bed. Shidoya joined me at my side, evidently not yet having accepted that a mysterious version of her was probably roaming around downstairs. You don't plan to travel to the past to put on these clothes, right? How could what I saw have happened if you never make it here? I won't, no, and I don't know either. It's just as strange as you're making it out to be. I played the moment back in my head. That expressionless person who'd unmistakably been Shidoya. What had her thoughts been at the time? I lay back in frustration. That had been the first time the bizarre body double situation had happened to someone I could trust and freely speak with, but she had no idea what the meaning behind it could have been. Perhaps it also applied to every other case. It could be that if we'd asked the original Naomi, she would have been able to explain the existence of her double self. Could something have been creating a replica of ourselves without our notice? I need to stop again. That's why Isla said that there were only 7 people trapped inside, because that Isla because Shidoya was right. Isla's secret friend is another Isla. It's the Isla from the other. But maybe there is time travel involved as well. But anyway, that's why she said there was only 7 people trapped inside, because in the other universe, there's no Katai there. And I guess nobody gets hurt. Which is nice, I guess. Why are we stuck in the shit world then? I gotta stop stopping to theorize, but I can't help it now. Ah, man. Alright. Where were we? It could be that if we'd asked the original Naomi, she would have been able to explain the existence of her double self. Could something have been creating a replica? Oh yeah, we did that. There was no way. Otherwise the Shidoya I'd seen would run to me as soon as she'd seen me. And even if she'd had a reason to borrow the clothes from the attic, if that was the answer, they wouldn't still be in the wardrobe. I clicked my tongue, sighed and rolled on the bed. I hated everything about it. When I looked at Shiroya, all I got from her face was a despondent expression. That version of you must have had some goal. If she'd somehow been lost or had suddenly popped into existence, she wouldn't have ignored me. What kind of goal? Well, look at what she accomplished. By wearing clothes from the attic, not responding to my shouts, and quickly hiding from view, she brought us here. You think I wanted to lead us far away from the event room? Honestly, what else could it be? That's where the Sekimeiya is. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm sure you must have had a good reason if that's what happened. No, that can't be it. I'm sure I don't want to touch the Sekimeiya again. You could have come from the future with further knowledge and an actual goal to achieve. You just said earlier that it can't be that, right? Even if in the future I think of a good reason to travel back to this point and use the Sekimeiya, I know how to do it because I would have already lived it. I'd be repeating what you saw, thanks to the fact that I repeated what you saw. That can't be it. I couldn't object. I'd use the same argument to deny many theories. But it wasn't fully reliable, as we didn't know the rules of the universe regarding time travel. Let's go back down, I suppose. We'll see if the Sekimeiya is still there, and there's a chance that we'll see you again. Okay. Accompanied by an unsettling, gloomy mood, we entered the hallway. We weren't feeling too energetic, so we called the elevator. After a few seconds, the button lit up orange. I opened the door and entered after it. After pressing the lowest button, I leaned on the uncomfortable handrail and wished for everything to finally end. We began to descend, surrounded by the unassuming sound of the elevator's motion and my deep sighs. This is a long elevator ride, man. Must be coffee time. Huh? Shiroya also realized that we'd stopped earlier than expected, and it took that long? As the secondary doors opened, we saw the floor 3 button blinking. Did you hit it accidentally? No. We looked at each other puzzled before staring at the opaque door that led to the 3rd floor. We were unaware of what awaited us, but we expected something to happen. Just push the button again. Someone must have pressed the button while we were inside. However, the door didn't immediately open. The only explanation was that someone had called it from the 3rd floor, but they weren't taking the ride. I timidly reached forward and pushed the door. A desolate corridor came into view with 0 apparent signs of life. I didn't see anyone. I stepped out with Shiroya right behind. I looked at the button, but nothing indicated whether it had been pressed. You sure you didn't hit it, right? Yeah, definitely. Oh, the elevator kept moving to the crystal floor. Shiroya called it again as I walked a few mindless steps, attempting to comprehend what could have happened. Did someone run away after pressing the button? I approached the stairs, the most likely route anyone would have chosen to hide in a rush. I couldn't immediately see anyone, so we'd have to choose which way to go. There's really no one here. Should we keep going down? I guess so. Maybe we should continue on foot. It could have been one of the other versions of you. Could have been the other version of you. I say it as if there's like 50 of them. Okay. Our synchronized footsteps began to echo around the wide interior, setting up an uncomfortable atmosphere we'd gotten very familiar with. I was barely ahead of Shiroya. After a few steps, I reached the left turn, where the entrance to the partition was. But out of nowhere, I saw a hand grip a knife swing toward me. My heart didn't have time to stop before I began to see the motion slowly. I knew I was heading toward a bad ending. I knew it. Without being able to give it any thought, I turned my whole body around as fast as possible. I felt a breeze at my side from the swipe whiffing. I looked up to witness Shiroya's expression, progressively changing to a terrified mask. As fast as my worn-out body let me, I dashed to her and grabbed her hand, running in the opposite direction. We ran as fast as possible and began to hear a 3rd person coming from behind us. We were being chased. The distance between us and the attacker was minimal. While we desperately dashed, we saw the elevator and the floor full staircase in front of us. Get in the elevator, head up, and then hit the stop button. They said they can't open it until they come back in. I was certain we weren't going to have time to open the elevator and use it before being caught. The staircase was our single option. I put my whole focus on running as hard as I could, tightly gripping Shiroya's hand. Without a doubt, the person we heard behind us had tried to kill me. Before we reached the stairs, I let go of her hand and prayed that we could go up fast enough. Halfway up, the crisp steps below us let us know the attacker hadn't given up and would continue to chase us. My heart began to race faster than I'd ever felt it. Despite how unreal it had seemed, the idea that someone around us wanted our death had proven correct. As soon as we'd reached the higher floor, we took off again. I looked to my side, ensuring that Shiroya was still okay. She met my look with terror, not a trace of wooziness remaining in her. What had we done, and why had we been attacked? A myriad of similar questions flooded my mind as we kept running through the stairway. Even though the bathrooms had been locked from the inside, Katai had said that his key opened all of them. We were most definitely being chased by his killer, who could have picked it up, or could go back to the security room to do so. Entering the partitions would only doom us too. Instead, with the distance between us and our attacker beginning to extend, we did our best not to slow down even for a second. Let's go to the attic. In a hoarse voice, I let out what I intended to be reassuring words that I couldn't finish off. I'd realised our only chance relied on the attic. The key should have still been there, so if we could keep the same pace until we arrived at it, we have enough time to lock ourselves inside. Once more, we forced our exhausted bodies up to floor 5 staircase, while the adrenaline's effects started to wear off. I desperately needed to slow down, but I pushed myself more than I'd ever thought I could. I wasn't going to die. I repelled that thought more than anything. I grabbed Shiroya's hand again and sprinted toward the partitions. We hadn't come to the tower to die. It had been the complete opposite. Almost 4 hours remained, and the footfalls behind us continually warned us how badly someone wanted us dead. Despite their lower speed, they were still running. We had to go to the attic. That was our only way to survive. Somehow, the culprit had a knife. As soon as I considered how nonsensical that was, a flash of Edna's death came to me. There had been a bloodstain on her chest, and although we hadn't inspected it, the same knife must have taken her life. The last staircase we'd have to power through was in reach. Shiroya's body began to tremble as a sign of how much she'd pushed herself to escape from the danger of death. Only one more. We'll lock ourselves up in the attic. My mind started to feel numb as soon as I spat out some words. She nodded almost imperceptibly, while the terrifying echo of our persistent attacker refused to fade. I stepped up the stairs, unable to match the prior pace. Our bodies couldn't withstand much more. As much as I tried to keep up, just for a few more seconds, my legs were barely responding. Seeing how the same thing was happening to Shiroya, I feared our lack of sleep would finally catch up to us. I hadn't been able to see the body of the attacker, but there weren't many options. They were chasing us with a knife, so we weren't going to die without knowing our killer's identity. We stepped onto the 6th floor and resumed what could no longer be called running, but a forced stagger. Fortunately, our attacker must have been in similar shape, as they hadn't used their exhaustion to catch up despite the continuous audible steps. It's still there. The attic door was open, and I could see the shining key placed in it. Merely wishing not to faint, we forced a last sprint as we heard the noise behind us growing louder. My body had already given out, but thankfully, too late to spell disaster for me. I took the key and entered the narrow staircase with Shiroya right behind me. As fast as I could, I shut the door and inserted the key in the inner keyhole. With a trembling hand, I turned it and locked it. As soon as the tumbler clicked, I stopped trying to control my body and collapsed between the two walls. They can still come up the elevator if they can get a second key. Are you okay? Spent a full minute catching our breath, during which no other sound reached our ears. Even though we'd achieved our only available goal, in the case the culprit had another key to the attic, there'd be nothing we could do. I'm fine. Let's go up. I stood up as soon as I felt able to, still staggering, and began walking up the stairs to distance ourselves as much as possible from the door. The culprit hadn't even tried to open it after chasing us the entire way up, which made it all the more unsettling. You didn't see their face, right? No, I only saw the knife come out of the corridor, and I think their sleeve was black. They must have had it hidden somewhere. I'm not sure, but it can only be an Arcada or Sai, and an earlier experience told me that I'd run faster than Sai, which I very much doubt is the case with Arcada. It has to be him then. I didn't know what to think. Someone had really tried to take my life when I had done nothing. Was I a threat? Or was the culprit just a psychopath? If it had been Sai, I couldn't honestly decide. I didn't know, but we might be safer here. I looked at my feet. No new footprints had been left since the last time we looked at the floor. There's supposed to be only one key for this place, but who can really tell? Duplication is a trivial matter at this point. At least if the culprit hadn't made a duplicate yet, they wouldn't be able to do it now. We could be alright. I'm not sure. If this is the same culprit who's been using the Sekimeiya this time, I'm certain they'd have a way to replicate the key even if we have it with us. If the culprit is Sai, for example, he could go back to the past and replicate his body during the time he was holding it. The pale fear projected on her face for a single instant was even more than soul-crushing. I'd been with her for so many years and never seen anything like it, not even recently. That's why I didn't voice the much scarier way the culprit could have made their way in. By travelling from the future, they could deliberately materialise themselves in the attic, as if their location was simply based on the time they'd been here. Let's make sure we're alone. Yeah. No matter who the attacker had been, two people would still be unaccounted for between Sai, Arcado, and the other Shiroya. We'd been in the attic just a couple of minutes earlier, but it wasn't impossible that someone else could also have been present at the time. We walked quietly around while a piercing feeling invaded my chest. Edna and Katai had recently died, and I'd barely been able to accept it, and their killer had shifted to target us, the last people remaining. I truly hoped that at 9 o'clock the police would come. I needed to get out with Shiroya at that time. There was no way I could make it even longer, a second longer without breaking down. My heart still racing, I went to the hallway through the kitchen and looked at the storeroom, while Shiroya stayed in the corner. After I'd seen the empty bathroom, we'd isolate the 2 bedrooms. I'll go up the ladder. Stay there. She came to the 2 parallel doors and looked at me while I climbed up the ladder of the rightmost bedroom. I was easily able to confirm nobody was hiding. I repeated the process in the opposite one, concluding that we were the only people in the attic. Shiroya joined me inside. Our lives were at risk of being cut short, but we couldn't do anything else. She sat on the bed, knowing that we could have been in the path of an unstoppable force. Oh man. No. But life wouldn't pity us. Before we could speak any words, a heart-stopping sound came from the hallway. Through a terrified whisper, Shiroya's raw anguish tore at the foundations of my will. The sound had made it clear. We were dealing with the real culprit, who had been able to enter our makeshift fortress trying to escape. It was futile. But I couldn't think of anything else. During the few seconds in which the approaching footsteps grew louder, only a single course of action came to me. The key. We need to lock ourselves in again. An equally terrified whisper came from within me. I rushed to the drawers where the key to the bedroom should have been. The bedroom we were in didn't have a chain, and crossing the hallway was too risky. What? It's not here! The bathroom's door was open and closed. The culprit was searching for us. Within my panic, I remembered it. Sai tried to use that bedroom's key to unlock the opposite door, and we hadn't seen where he'd left it afterward. Another door was open, but it wasn't ours, but the one in front, leading to the bedroom where we'd spent more than an hour locked inside. Fuck! We should shut the culprit inside with the key, but entering to get it might be too dangerous. We need to leave. As I said that, I took my shoes off and gestured to Shiroya to quickly do the same. We'd have been able to hear the approaching culprit because of their shoes. Without them, walking on wood would be almost imperceptible. I looked through the door and heard movements coming from the other bedroom. We didn't have much time. Shiroya and I nodded at each other and left while making the least amount of noise possible, holding our shoes with our hands. We approached the living room and began to increase our speed. The culprit had somehow entered the attic, but we didn't know which method they'd used. If they'd taken the elevator, it could still have been there, but we couldn't afford the risk of having to wait for it to come. Without giving much thought, we entered the living room. As soon as we did, the dry noise of footsteps on wood froze us in place. They were coming to us. Instead of entering the other bedroom, very faint footsteps were approaching the living room, where we were. Wait. No, we can't rush out. We might be going up against Sai, and he wouldn't let us escape like this. If he entered the attic with another key, he could be luring us to the staircase. We'd been so desperate that I'd left our key on the floor, next to the attic door. If Sai had managed to enter, and had then locked the door, if we'd also picked up our key, we couldn't leave, and we would just corner ourselves while walking down the stairs. I glanced down and saw footprints that didn't belong to us. The culprit had definitely walked through that floor after our arrival. The terror locked my muscles in place. While the sound got closer, I began to explore the thought of attacking the culprit as soon as they entered the living room. Fuck, why didn't I think about this? They have a knife, and I can't just tell Shiroya to help me. We can't go that way. She's been telling me to hurry up with their eyes. They could have sealed it all. I grabbed her available hand and dashed to the kitchen. What are you doing? Trying to leave through the main door didn't sound right, or we might already be done for. The only other way out, the elevator, could also be taken care of. The culprit had waited a couple of minutes before making the entrance, so if they used it to disable the elevator below us, we would have been completely trapped. From the kitchen we heard the living room's door open. We had to make our move. If they look at the footprints, it's possible they could see that we're in the kitchen. We have to get out of here. But a different thought came to me. If they recognized the footprints and anticipated their actions, they could wait in the hallway knowing we'd immediately leave. It was too late, as I already grabbed Shiroya's hand and wasn't able to stop mine from turning the handle of the door. The hallway was empty, but we could see the open door to the living room. With very little time to think, I could only come up with 2 courses of action. Do we go to the other bedroom where we can lock the door, or do we try to use the elevator? I couldn't decide. Once again, I considered that we might be facing Sai, who had taken some time to think up a strategy specifically so we couldn't run away. He could have simply disabled the elevator on the lower floor and blocked off that escape method. But he just left the bedroom, and earlier I put the key inside the drawer where we'd found it. What if he just took it? And going there will trap us as well. We had the chain, but it was unreliable. We'd seen how Arcado had burst through it in 5 seconds. Not only that, but even though we were supposed to possess the single key to the attic, the culprit had managed to make their way in. The same thing could repeat in the bedroom. Earlier, Arcado and Sai had escaped with its key, and we knew that they'd activated the Sekimeiya in some way. It was possible they'd even produced a spare key already. Let's try the elevator. Trying to call it is all we can do. If it doesn't come, we'll have to leave. Okay. My heartbeat running wild inside my ears almost drowned out our voices. The culprit hadn't entered the kitchen, meaning that they were either in the living room or the staircase. They'd have to pass through the open door to get to the elevator, so we had to hope that they'd gone down the stairs and wouldn't see us. In an instant, we were on the other side. I'd been able to glance through the door and had seen an empty living room. We sped up toward the elevator, but I stopped myself as soon as I remembered something. Huh? Wait, this could be bad. Everything could be a trap, and even though we're in close proximity to a killer, we had to attempt to think rationally. We've been instinctively running away to gain time, but we knew that was utterly pointless if every place was in reach of them. There was one goal we could strive for. The noise behind us resumed. Again, the culprit was approaching. We didn't have time to run to the elevator and hope that it's either here or functioning. This is definitely a trap. I opened the storeroom and dashed inside. Through the gap of the door we could see the hallway, the sound of the culprit's movement still reaching our ears. But it had become too hard to discern the way they were going. They're not coming here. I think it's very possible that after we left the event room, the Sekimeiya was taken out. We have to rely on that and try to find it, since we don't have a key to open the cabinet. If we find it, we can choose a place to stay hidden until we're unavoidably found. Then we can activate it. If we go far into the past, we won't be able to think of ambushing the culprit knowing where they'll be, since it would contradict them finding us. But we could make it outside the tower if we're lucky enough. If we travel to the recent past, we could find a new place to hide that the culprit would have just looked at. It'd only buy us some more time, but it's better than having to confront someone with a knife or keep exhausting ourselves. This has to work. On the 3rd floor, the attacker was by the partition's corner and not in the staircase next to the elevator. That must have been done either to look at us from afar or prevent us from going down to the crystal floor. They wanted to chase us up instead of down. Eventually, every sound faded away, and we could only hear our shaking breaths. In the cramped storeroom, we had to prepare for what our next and most important move would be. Why is the culprit not moving anymore? Are they waiting for us? Do we try to call the elevator? No, I remembered how this all started when I stopped myself. We were going down with the elevator and stopped on floor 3 because someone called it, knowing we were inside. No matter who the culprit is at this point, they must have thought of disabling the elevator under us so that we can't use it to escape. If despite that we called the elevator and it came, we'd have to be sure that it's a trap and that they intend to do the same thing as before. As soon as we go down, they would call it. The last time, they waited next to the partitions, but this time, I'm sure they'll be right outside to make sure that we can't continue moving. Think about it. It's also possible we're facing 2 people, Arcado and Sai. If one of them is on the floor under us, they could be hoping we take the elevator to have us in the narrowest of corners. But there's nothing else we can do, is there? Assuming the elevator hasn't been used again, it should still be on floor 3. If the culprit, or one of them, is waiting next to the floor 6 elevator and we call it from here, they'd hear it going up. Then they'd know we'd be about to board it and use it, so they could call it to intercept us. I was experiencing the most unsettling silence possible. Waiting in the storeroom wasn't an option, so I could only find 3. Trying to use the elevator to go down, trying to lock ourselves in the bedroom, or trying to leave the attic through the main door. The culprit wasn't moving. They could have been close by, or far away. Regardless, it was certain that they'd thought of a course of action to apprehend us. Why would they have stopped searching for us when it's certain we're in the attic? It would mean that the culprit is working alone. If they'd put an end to the search to ambush us, it would mean that nobody's working with them, or their partner would have covered that job while the other kept trying to find us. So where are they waiting? No matter who we're dealing with, they aren't stupid. They must have grabbed the bedroom key just now, so going there is too obvious of a mistake. If the elevator is working, that means they have a way to cover us going down. It sounds illogical, but trying to walk out could be the best idea. It doesn't make sense that they're just outside the storeroom, waiting for us to leave. That implies they know we're somewhere around, and if they did, they'd be rushing in. After all, earlier, they were opening every room. This means that for some reason, they might have left the attic. Even though we're exhausted, we're also faster than them. We should be able to run away again if they see us on the floor below, where there's more space. I thought about going to a bedroom to pick up a screwdriver. It was the only weapon I could think of, but I abandoned the thought. It was no match against a knife, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt that going back to a bedroom was a bad idea. Furthermore, if the culprit had taken the key, they might have done the same with the screwdriver, a clear weapon we could obtain. Let's go. We'll try to leave through the main entrance. Shidori responded with a confused look, but she didn't object. We had to hope that, out of the few options we had, one would let us live. I wasn't confident I'd picked the right one, but I knew that would have applied with all of them. We stepped into the hallway, praying that the faint noise our feet produced wasn't being conveyed to the attacker. Every corner made my heart stop, and my senses were on higher alert than they'd ever been. Knowing a knife could suddenly swing at any time, we took short steps forward until we saw the entire empty hallway. But our terror couldn't subside yet. Silently, I peeked into the living room and let out a long, coming breath as soon as I saw it empty. Okay, we need to leave. The tension I found when I found myself in the middle of the living room was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. From 3 different doors, a killer could have suddenly rushed in. We paid attention to our full surroundings until the staircase came into view. Nobody was there, but I knew I had to look for something else. That's our key. On the floor, the key we'd used to lock ourselves in showed that the culprit hadn't taken it. We can leave at least. Making it to wherever the Sekimeiya was still felt like the single goal we could attempt to achieve. We started to walk down at the same time. At the bottom I crouched to pick up the key, but midway through I realised we wouldn't need it to leave. The door wasn't closed. Look, this settles it. The culprit has another key for this door, and that's how they entered. While they could have teleported inside and unlocked the door with our own key, they wouldn't have left it behind. I reached for the door and began to push it from a distance, so that I'd be able to quickly turn around if someone was behind it. But nobody was. The barren scenery of floor 6 felt almost harmless, although nothing would have made us lower our guard. Wait 1 second. Shidori turned around and grabbed the attic key from the floor. Then, from the outside, she locked it. Could be that the culprit's still inside. If they disabled the elevator, there's a small chance I just locked them in. If they already left, it could even lead them to think that we shut ourselves inside again. It was a good little idea. She put the key in her purse, and attaching ourselves to the left wall, we picked up a fairly brisk pace, intending to reach the crystal floor. Every floor was packed with perilous turns where our attacker could have been waiting, and I found it very likely that they could have been near an elevator door, expecting us to use it at any point. We circled through the entire 6th floor and went down the first staircase. We still had our shoes in our hands, so we were making the least amount of noise possible. Unfortunately, the strong echo amplified our steps enough to nullify the effect. Running through floor 5, I thought of what we would do if the Sekimeiya hadn't been taken from the cabinet. Unable to undo our own lock, we'd be done for. Going to the security room to attempt to pick up Katai's bathroom key would be the last thing we could depend on. However, it was very likely the culprit had taken it. We made it to floor 4. We continually made a series of turns, moving down through the building. Meanwhile, I kept trying to force the thought out that any plain walls could be the last thing we ever saw. Alright, we got an ambush happening, but we're going to wrap this one up here because we're out of time for this episode. So I'm cliffhangering you here, and in the next episode, let's get ambushed again. It might not go as well this time because we're already knackered from running away last time. Though so is he, I suppose, unless there's 2 of them, in which case we're fucked. Guess we'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.